Adoption is a big issue, and it's very prevalent now. There are more and more people who are being adopted, and there are people who are becoming adoptive parents, single parent adoptions, and it's a huge way of living and way of being family in the 21st century, more so than ever. 60 years ago, it was quite uncommon for someone to be adopted, and often it was done within the same family. And now it's huge, and children are adopted from all over the world. So there's a lot of international adoptions. Children are coming out of Romania to America. Children are coming out of Korea to America. Children are coming from Lebanon to England. Children are coming from war-torn Syria and living out of their national place of birth. So adoption is a very, very important issue right now. And often what happens is that there are lots of children, and they're not because a 16-year-old girl got pregnant and was too shamed or embarrassed to be a single parent raising a child. That scenario practically doesn't exist anymore, mainly because a lot of those kids who have unwanted pregnancies get abortions. Or we have raised our consciousness enough to know how to help them have the child and keep the child. So it's more that children are getting adopted who have experienced trauma, who had to be removed, or have lost their parents, or they've come out of war, very serious situations, into parents who can't have children for one reason or another. The infertility rate has raised a lot. So when you ask the question, what does adoption mean to me when I hear that word, to me it means loss. First of all, the loss for the adopted child who lost their birth mother and father, if they knew of them, and the loss for the adoptive parents who, for some reason, have come to the situation because perhaps they could not have a child of their own. I am an adopted mother. I have an adopted son, and so adoption is a very real daily process for me. And so to me, adoption has to do with how you love a child you didn't give birth to, and how the child embraces parents that were not their birth parents. And so that's a huge subject. And even if a child does come to adoptive parents without any trauma, there's still a sense of self that has been lost. And there's a grieving, whether the child's aware of it or not, from not being raised by the female who gave birth to them. So there's a grieving process involved. There's an attachment issue about how do I attach myself to this stranger. Even if they were there with you from 2 weeks from the time they were born, there's still issues around adoption and identity. And especially if the child doesn't look anything like the birth parents, that raises lots of issues. It gets more complicated if the child never has the opportunity to connect with their birth parents. They often feel a lack and a void, and they feel not present in the situation they're in because they feel misplaced and they should belong somewhere else. Whether they wanted to or not, those feelings don't go away and somehow have to be addressed. Well, the question is whether love is enough, or whether if you just love someone, that will make it all right. Ultimately, that's true, but love takes on a lot of skill. There's a lot of skill in loving, and we have to learn how to love in difficult situations, and that's very much the case with adopting children, is to learn how to love them and how to see what they need and how to supply what they need, and to take care of yourself as well. Big subject. With children, it has to be fun. A child's work is play, and the best way to love your child and to do therapy on your child is to play with them and to make it positive all the time. That's the challenge. The first issue when you're working with parents who are adopting is to understand development and how a child develops a sense of themselves and how that gets difficult when they're adopted. And it's about who they're attached to and who they get their sense of self from. So if a child comes to you when they're older, you adopt them when they're 4, they already have an attachment or a lack of it, a disorder of attachment when they've come to you. And so then you've inherited that as an adoptive parent. And so the work begins by understanding what behaviors come out of that attachment disorder and then how you can make it better. Parents with adopted children are dealing with extra problems. They're also dealing with extra problems in themselves. And so they will need help and they'll need training unless they were raised in a situation where maybe in their family their birth mother adopted children and they became their siblings, and they have more experience and understanding than someone who comes to the table without having any clue what they've adopted. When I adopted my son, who was almost 2, I could see that he had suffered a lot of trauma and that there were serious issues there, so much so that I was quite reticent to enter into the process of adoption. So being a therapist, I had my eyes wide open. And also, once we entered the process, because he stole my heart and I fell in love with him, and he clearly was, a gift to me and was my son, I was amazed how much I didn't know. I was amazed at how ill-equipped I was. And I had to receive very specialized help from people who worked with attachment disorder and worked with children who had suffered trauma and adoption and learning difficulties. Often they go together. And developmental delay, all of those things come in a package often with children. And you enter a whole world, and you need people that are there who can help you on that journey. There is always hope, and there's always help out there when you begin to look for it. And sometimes you have to look longer than you want, but the help is there.